They nailed the paper to my barn door at 2 in the morning. The rusty nail screamed as it pierced the wood. And under the floodlight, the sheet glared white against the night, stamped with a crooked HOA logo and red ink smeared like a cheap past-due stamp. My ranch wasn't under their jurisdiction. This was a fraud and their first warning shot. My name's Mark. I run a small cattle ranch along the western fence of Silver Creek Estates, a manicured, gated HOA community. The county plat map makes the boundary plain their suburban dream on one side, my livestock and soil on the other. Over the past weeks, I'd noticed their board members walking the perimeter, whispering about property values and odors. I yanked the paper off and laid it flat on the workbench. The letterhead looked like it had been pulled from a home printer, fonts uneven, logo stretched. Still, the message at the bottom sent a chill through me. Failure to comply will be escalated to county. They couldn't find me, but they could drown me in complaints, drag county inspectors out here until my ranch looked like a nuisance case. I pulled up the barn camera feed. The footage was grainy with mist, but reflective tape flashed clear in the corner of the fence. 3 figures, one hammering, one filming with a phone, one keeping watch. The license plate on their pickup caught just enough light ending in 7PZ'd. I froze the frame, zoomed. On the hammerman's glove was the stitched logo of the HOA's maintenance contractor. Not police, not officials. Just a volunteer patrol acting like enforcers. Then the sound hit me. The wind through the drainage culvert carried more than rustling reeds. It carried a whistle. Broken, off-key, but familiar. My son Kai used to whistle that tune whenever he counted calves. He'd been gone for years, lost to a flood everyone insisted was an accident. Hearing it now from the direction of the clubhouse drainpipe, my chest tightened until my ribs hurt. A tune doesn't mean a ghost, I told myself, but my hands trembled anyway. I lifted the notice again. They had quoted a clause on acceptable odor levels within the community, a rule that didn't cross my fence line. At the bottom it was signed Compliance Committee. That committee had no authority here, yet the threat to escalate was real enough. I logged into the county's code enforcement portal, the same system I'd used when I applied for a new barn permit. I clicked Complaints Near You. A fresh line glowed blue. Case, CE 24-3119. Odor, fly nuisance, observed from adjacent ranch. Time stamped 2:11 a.m. 2 blurry photos attached, both taken from the direction of my back gate. Whoever left the fake notice had also filed a real complaint to give it teeth. I opened my notebook. Next steps. 1. Extract the full video. 2. Send the clip and the 7PZ plate to the county investigator. 3. Email the contractor about their night crew. 4. Print the plat map with the drainage easement marked. Out in the paddock, a calf kicked the trough, echo sharp in the cold air. On the screen, the time blinked 2:19. I killed the barn light, then switched it back on an instinctive twitch after the image of that nail stuck in my mind. At the fence line, a red brake light flared once from the pickup and then vanished into darkness. I wasn't mistaken. This wasn't some childish prank. The HOA had already pulled the county into it. And from here, things would only climb higher. The morning after, the notice lay spread across my kitchen table beside a cold mug of coffee. My wife, Lan, tapped the fake letterhead with her finger. "They're trying to scare us," she said, voice clipped. "They already did more than that," I answered, sliding the county case printout toward her. They filed an actual complaint while they nailed this thing to the barn. At noon, I walked into the community clubhouse for the monthly HOA board meeting. I wasn't a member, but their agenda had listed odor and fly concerns adjacent to western boundary. The room smelled of carpet cleaner and tension. Rows of neighbors in pressed polos and yoga pants turned their heads as I stepped in, boots muddy from chores. The HOA president, Deborah Cole, stood at the front like a judge. silver hair cut sharp, clipboard hugged to her chest. She didn't invite me to sit. "Mr. Tran," she said, mispronouncing my name like a gavel strike. "Your ranch is a constant subject of concern. We've received multiple reports you wrote yourselves." I shot back. I placed the fake notice on the folding table. Gasps fluttered through the room. "This has no legal bearing, and you know it." Deborah's smile didn't waver. "Perhaps neighbors are taking initiative. We cannot control every volunteer." Except the same night, a complaint was filed to County Code Enforcement. I said, holding up the printout. At 2:11 a.m., along with photographs that could only have been taken from this community's side of the fence. The board murmured. Deborah leaned forward. "If your ranch were better maintained, no one would feel the need to act." I bit back the urge to shout, "My ranch is inspected by county agriculture. We pass every time." Then the room shifted. A sound crackled through the overhead speakers, slicing through the argument. Not the microphone, not feedback, something else. A whistle. Off-key. Halting. My chest froze. It was the same tune from last night. The board members looked around, confused. Some residents laughed nervously, thinking it a prank. Deborah's face tightened, but she kept her posture. "Technical glitch," she said, tapping the mic. "Please ignore." The whistle grew louder, distorted through the speakers, then broke into words I knew too well. "Dad, I'm here." The room fell silent. My throat closed. It was Kai's voice. The voice of my son lost to the flood. Every syllable punched through me like a nail. Deborah snapped her fingers at the AV technician in the back. He fumbled with the laptop, muttering. The speakers went dead. "That concludes public comment." Deborah barked, trying to wrest control back. Meeting adjourned, but the damage was done. Half the room was whispering, staring at me with a mix of pity and suspicion. The other half shot looks at the board, unsettled. Someone muttered, "Was that a kid's voice?" Another said. Sounded real. I gathered the paper and printout, jaw tight. As I stepped outside into the bright sun, my boots sank into the manicured grass. My ears still rang with the whistle. The HOA wanted to frame me as a nuisance, but now my son's voice, whether ghost, glitch, or something else, had entered the record of their own meeting. That night, as I replayed the meeting's live stream on my laptop, the whistle cut in again. Only this time, the audio log showed the file had been injected from inside the HOA board's Zoom account. Do you think this was truly my son reaching out, or a calculated setup by the HOA to break me down? I didn't sleep. The glow of the laptop screen lit my office, while the rest of the ranch stayed dark. I had replayed the HOA live stream 3 times, slowing the feed until the pixels broke apart. Each time, the same whistle bled into the audio, followed by that voice, Kai's voice. But this time I caught something else. In the lower corner of the recording, the system log flickered audio file injected by co-host account HOA Treasurer JW. My stomach turned. Someone on the board had pushed the file directly into the feed. Not a ghost, not a random glitch, an inside job. I printed the log, added it to my growing folder of evidence, the fake notice, the plate number, the county case. My desk was starting to look like a detective's wall, threads pulling tighter. By dawn, I was in the paddock tossing hay. Lan brought coffee out in a thermos. Her eyes lingered on the barn door where the nail holes still gaped. "You should let it go," she whispered, "and let them build a case until county shuts us down." I shook my head. "They're not just after the ranch. Land, they're playing with us." She didn't argue. She just turned back toward the house, her shoulders stiff with worry. Later that morning, A neighbor I barely knew waved me over the fence. He was older, skin like weathered leather, hands shaking slightly. "You think this is about the smell?" he asked in a rasp. "It's not. They've been covering their tracks since the flood." I froze. "What flood?" He lowered his voice. "The one that took your boy. That drainage pipe wasn't supposed to be sealed. Somebody ordered it welded years ago. You dig deep enough, you'll find the work order." My blood went cold. I asked his name, but he shook his head. "Doesn't matter. Just know you're not crazy." Then he shuffled away, leaving me with nothing but dust and dread. That night, I logged into the county archives from my old laptop. After 3 false starts, I found a reference to a stormwater maintenance contract signed by the HOA nearly a decade ago. The contractor's name was blurred in the scan, but the date matched the year Kai disappeared. I leaned back, heart pounding. This wasn't about mowed lawns or painted mailboxes. This was about the same drain that had swallowed my son. I killed the light and walked out to the fence line. The subdivision glowed like a lantern, porch lights strung in a row. And then, from the culvert. The whistle rose again, clearer this time, a child's tune cutting through the night air. I gripped the fence post until my knuckles whitened. My mind screamed it had to be a trick, a recording looped by someone trying to break me. But my heart swore it was him. When I checked the county complaint log before bed, a new entry had appeared, time-stamped just minutes earlier. Case CE 24-3120. Unauthorized livestock expansion, filed by Compliance Committee. Attached was a photo of my paddock, taken from inside my property. So I have to ask if someone trespassed onto your land at night, filing official complaints with photos taken right there on your soil. Would you confront them face to face? Or call the authorities first? By the next week, the county's white SUV rolled up the gravel drive. The seal of code enforcement gleamed on the door, and 2 inspectors stepped out in pressed khakis. They weren't hostile, but they carried clipboards the way deputies carried sidearms. "Mr. Tran," one asked. I nodded. "Complaint alleges odor, fly nuisance, and possible runoff toward the subdivision. We'll need to take a look." Lon stood behind me on the porch, arms folded. I waved them through the gate. The cattle shuffled in the corral, curious. We walked the line of fence where manure was piled for composting. The younger inspector wrinkled his nose, jotting notes. "Flies are natural around livestock," I said, trying to keep calm. "We keep it managed." The older inspector glanced at the bins, then at the drainage ditch. "I don't see violations, but we have to file a report." By the time they left, I knew how the story would read. Even if they found nothing, the paper trail itself stained me. Case numbers stack like bricks. The HOA didn't need a conviction. They needed volume. That night, another envelope slid under the barn door. This one stamped with a bold red seal, past due. Inside, a printed fine for $1,500. No court header, no county signature, just the words, "Compliance Committee." A joke. If it weren't stapled to a photograph of my paddock, the same photo I'd seen attached to the newest county complaint, my chest burned. They weren't just filing with the county. They were sneaking onto my property, taking pictures, and repackaging them as official notices. The nail hole in the barn door, the blurred plate on the pickup, every detail gnawed at me. Lon found me staring at the envelope under the dim kitchen light. "They're trying to make you snap," she said quietly. "They want you to storm into their meetings, yelling. That way you look like the crazy one." I rubbed my temples. "Then what do I do? Sit here and wait for the next fake fine, the next inspector?" She pressed her hand over mine. "You gather everything. You build a case stronger than theirs." Later, while I scanned the fine into my evidence folder, the barn camera pinged motion. I pulled up the feed. A single figure stood just beyond the fence line, face hidden by a hood, holding what looked like a phone aloft as if recording. Then the feed glitched static lines, the figure vanishing mid-frame. When the picture cleared, the paddock was empty. I replayed it 3 times. No car, no footsteps, nothing but the steady glow of the clubhouse lights across the way. Shivers crawled down my spine. HOA intimidation was one thing, but camera glitches timed with trespassers, that was something else. I printed the still frame, even if blurred. Another thread on the wall of evidence. By midnight, the county portal refreshed with a new case entry. Case, Shackrock CE 24-3121. Excessive animal noise. Filed by neighbor. No photo this time, just a description. Yet when I clicked the attachment link, a file opened anyway. An audio clip of cows bellowing, distorted, undercut with a faint whistle in the background. Not just any whistle. Kai's. And suddenly I knew whoever was filing these complaints wasn't just building a nuisance case. They were threading my son into it, piece by piece, until the line between legal harassment and something unholy blurred into one. By morning, the subdivision was buzzing. I drove into town for feed, and at the diner counter 2 women in tennis skirts whispered loud enough for me to hear. They say the ranch is haunted, or maybe he's covering something up. Why else would inspectors keep showing up? I clenched my jaw, carried my coffee out to the truck, and drove home with my hands tight on the wheel. The HOA didn't need proof. Rumor was enough to rot the air between fences. That evening, a neighbor walked down the gravel road and leaned over the fence. He was younger than me, maybe mid-30s, the type who wore polo shirts even on weekends. "You ought to know," he said, eyes shifting toward the subdivision. "Deborah's been telling people your land lowers their property values. Says buyers won't even tour homes when the wind's right." I let out a bitter laugh. Property values. My son drowned in that drainage they welded shut. That's the only value I care about. The man hesitated, then lowered his voice. "My uncle worked maintenance years ago. He told me they sealed that grate under the clubhouse, claimed it was vandal-proofing. Kids used to sneak down there. After the accident. They scrubbed the records." "Which accident?" I asked sharply. His eyes darted away. "The flood. The one that took your boy." The words landed like stones. I stepped closer to the fence. "You're saying the HOA ordered the weld." He lifted his hands. "I'm saying people knew. People still know. But they won't talk. Too scared of lawsuits or losing their homes." Then he walked off, leaving me with nothing but the wind and the ache in my chest. That night, I dug through the county archives again. Most entries were routine tree trimming permits, sidewalk repairs, noise complaints, but tucked in a scanned PDF. I found a stormwater map. A thick black line marked the drainage running under the clubhouse, labeled "Great" to remain sealed. The date matched the year Kai vanished. The scan was grainy, the signature blurred, but the intent was clear. They hadn't just neglected maintenance, they'd signed off on welding the pipe shut. Lon came into the office, catching me hunched over the printout. "You need to stop before it swallows you," she said softly. I shook my head. It already swallowed him. As if on cue, the barn camera pinged again. I pulled up the feed. This time it wasn't a person at the fence. It was a shape, small, quick running across the paddock. A child's silhouette, flickering as though the lens itself doubted it was there. Then static, and gone. I stared until my eyes watered. My rational mind screamed interference. Dust, maybe an insect close to the lens. But my gut whispered otherwise. When the feed resumed, a new county complaint had already hit my inbox. Case 1 CE 24-3122. Suspicious nighttime activity observed on ranch property. Attached was a still frame, the very same blurred child's silhouette I had just seen. Whoever was feeding these cases to the county wasn't outside watching. They were inside my cameras, pulling files straight from my system. And if they could see everything I saw, then they'd heard me whisper my son's name into the dark. The next day, I confronted Deborah in broad daylight. She was trimming roses at the edge of her perfect lawn when I walked up, the stormwater map folded in my back pocket. "You filed another complaint," I said flatly. She looked up with that polished smile. "I don't control what neighbors send to the county." "You controlled this," I snapped, holding out the map. "This weld order is signed the year my son disappeared, and it came from your board." For the first time, her eyes flickered. Just for a second, then the smile returned. Colder. "Old paperwork means nothing. And if you continue to trespass into county archives or defame this community, you'll be hearing from our attorney." She turned back to her roses, clipping a stem like she was cutting me off at the root. I walked away shaking, fury burning through my veins. Lon begged me to drop it, but I couldn't not when I felt Kai's whistle in every gust of wind. That evening, I met the older neighbor again, the one with trembling hands. He passed me a folded page torn from what looked like an old contractor's log. The ink was faded, but a line was clear. "Weld storm grate, clubhouse culvert, paid HOA maintenance fund." "I kept this all these years," he whispered. "Couldn't throw it away. Thought someday someone might need it." My hands shook as I unfolded it. Proof, not rumor, not archive scans and original record. Back home. I pinned it to my evidence board beside the fake notices and complaint numbers. The wall was becoming a battlefield, and I was outnumbered. Just past midnight, the dogs began to bark. I rushed outside, shotgun in hand, floodlights blazing. At the far fence line, movement. But not men this time. A figure stood small and still, no taller than my son when he vanished. "Who's there?" I shouted, voice cracking. The figure didn't run. It raised one arm, as though pointing past me. I spun, heart hammering. But the yard was empty. When I turned back, the figure was gone. I checked the barn camera immediately. Static tore the feed, then cleared to show the paddock bare. But in the system's event log, a new file had been created without my input. I clicked it open. The audio played my son's whistle, followed by a voice, soft and broken. "Dad." They sealed me in. I slammed the laptop shut, chest heaving. The county portal chimed. Another case, this one more pointed than any before. Case, CE 24-3123. Possible concealed hazard on ranch property. Recommend immediate investigation. Attached was a blurred photo of the culvert itself, as if the complaint writer wanted to draw official eyes straight to the same place I'd been avoiding. I leaned back, pulse racing, the neighbor's torn log page still trembling in my hand. Someone wanted the county to dig, but if they did, what would they find? My son's memory, or his body? And here's what I can't shake if you were me. And every new complaint brought inspectors closer to uncovering the truth. Would you welcome them in to finally expose the board, or keep them out for fear of what they might uncover by the third week? My office walls looked more like an evidence bunker than a rancher's home. Notices tacked beside county case numbers, blurry stills from my cameras. A map of the stormwater system circled in red. Every thread led back to the same place, the culvert beneath the clubhouse. The drain they had welded shut. I needed more than whispers and torn log pages. I needed official records. Something that couldn't be brushed aside as rumor. So I drove 30 miles into the county seat and parked beneath the dull concrete bulk of the records building. Inside, The clerk frowned when I asked for stormwater maintenance contracts. "That'll take a while to pull," she said. I waited under humming fluorescent lights until she wheeled out a cart stacked with boxes, paper-heavy with dust, the kind that smelled like secrets. I sifted through file after file until one caught my breath, a work order stamped with the HOA's letterhead. Weld storm grate, clubhouse culvert, purpose, prevent vandalism. The date matched the year of the flood. The contractor's name printed at the bottom made my blood run cold. Cole & Sons Maintenance. Deborah's husband's company. I copied the file, scanned it, folded it into my binder. Proof that the HOA president's own family had signed off on the grate that trapped my boy. On the way out, I noticed a line of text on the bottom margin, half blurred by the copier inspected and approved by County Stormwater Division, which meant someone at the county had looked at this, nodded, and filed it away. The negligence wasn't just HOA, it had official fingerprints. Back at the ranch, I told Lan what I found. She paled, pressing a hand to her mouth. "You can't fight both them and the county," she said. "I can't not," I answered. "If I stop, he stays buried." That night, the barn camera pinged again. I opened the feed. No figures this time, just the paddock under moonlight. Then the screen flickered, pixelated, and a new file appeared in the system log. Audio, 3 seconds long. I pressed play. It was the sound of rushing water, echoing like it came from inside a pipe. Then a cough wet, strangled, unmistakably a child's. I ripped the headphones off, bile rising in my throat. Lan came into the office, startled by my expression. I couldn't bring myself to play it for her. Not yet. The county portal refreshed with another complaint, almost on cue. Case Jackert CE 24-3124. Unstable soil conditions observed near paddock. Recommend inspection. Attached was a photo taken so close to my property line the angle could only come from inside my fence. Again. I printed it and pinned it beside the stormwater contract. A pattern emerged every time I found a piece of truth. Another complaint landed to bury me. I stared at the wall of paper until the words blurred. They could call me a nuisance. They could send inspectors. They could drown me in red tape, but they couldn't erase what I'd found. Deborah's name, her husband's contract, the county's approval. And now the whispers of water and the cough of a boy no one but me seemed willing to hear. The more I dug, the louder the past seemed to answer. The clubhouse smelled of lemon polish and chlorine, the kind of false cleanliness meant to distract from cracks underneath. I wasn't supposed to be there. But I'd learned the HOA left its side door unlocked during evening yoga classes. While neighbors stretched in the main hall, I slipped down the service corridor with my phone flashlight. Every step echoed too loudly, the hum of the HVAC vibrating in my bones. At the far end, a metal door bore a plaque mechanical access authorized personnel. Only, I eased it open. The air changed instantly damp, metallic, heavy. Concrete stairs led down to a cramped room lined with pipes. My light landed on a grate bolted into the floor. Weld marks glistened like scars across the metal, old but deliberate. I crouched, brushing the edges with my fingers. Cold, rough, permanent. The weld that sealed the pipe where water once rushed free. The weld that turned a storm drain into a trap. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A notification from the barn camera, motion detected. I ignored it, focused on the grate. And then, through the silence of the basement, a sound bled up. Not rushing water, not pipe groans. A whistle, 3 notes, halting, off-key. I staggered back, breath ragged. The sound seeped through the steel as if the drain itself were exhaling. I recorded 10 seconds before bolting upstairs, my boots thudding on the steps. When I emerged into the corridor, Deborah was waiting. She stood with arms crossed, clipboard in hand, eyes sharp as razors, "Mr. Tran," she said, "smooth as glass. You're trespassing." I shoved the phone into my pocket. "You welded that grate shut. Your husband's company signed the order." Her smile didn't falter. "Old maintenance? Perfectly routine? And if you continue this obsession, I'll have you served with a restraining order." Yoga music drifted faintly from the main hall, a jarring contrast to the knife edge of her words. I pushed past her, the urge to shout clawing at my throat. But shouting would give her exactly what she wanted me, looking like the unhinged rancher, the paranoid father, back home. I checked the barn camera alert. The clip was corrupted, pixels twisting into static. When it cleared, the paddock was empty. But the audio carried something else, the same three-note whistle I'd just heard beneath the clubhouse, faint and warped, as though the distance between my land and theirs didn't exist. I printed the still of the welded grate from my phone, added it to the board, beside it, the contractor's log, the stormwater map, Deborah's name. The threads were no longer scattered, they converged here, at the mouth of a pipe that should have been open. Lon tried to take my hand that night, to remind me we still had cattle to feed, bills to pay, a life to keep running. But my mind was already buried under concrete with that weld, chasing the echo of a whistle that shouldn't exist. And just before I shut down the computer, another county complaint appeared. Case CE 24-3125. Unauthorized entry into HOA facility by ranch owner. Attached was a grainy still from a clubhouse camera me, frozen mid-step in the service corridor. Someone had turned my search for truth into yet another weapon against me. The complaint about unauthorized entry landed like a trap snapping shut. I hadn't even left the clubhouse before they were already spinning my presence into a violation. Deborah and her board weren't just defending themselves anymore, they were going on the attack. I filed a statement with the county, attaching my evidence, the stormwater contract, the photos of the welded grate, the corrupted audio from my cameras. But as I hit send, a sinking truth settled in. The county had already approved the weld years ago. What incentive did they have to side with me now? That night, sleep was impossible. I sat in the office, staring at the wall of paper, feeling as if the eyes of every complaint were staring back. Just after midnight, the system pinged again. A new file appeared in my security log, this one marked Recovered Media. I hadn't triggered it, hadn't touched a thing. I clicked it open. Video flickered on my screen, a dim view of concrete walls, water trickling, a narrow pipe stretching into black. Then the camera jerked as if held by unsteady hands. A child's gasp filled the speakers, followed by coughing, wet and ragged. The picture blurred, toppled, and ended with a single frame, a small shoe, mud-stained, caught against welded steel. My chair scraped back. The file had no timestamp, no origin, just a phantom recording slipped into my system. Lon came into the room, hair tangled from sleep. I told her not to look, but she saw enough to press both hands over her mouth. Tears welled in her eyes. "They're tormenting us," she whispered. "Or he's reaching out," I said, though my voice cracked on the words. By dawn, I drove back into town. At the coffee shop, neighbors hushed as I passed, conversations about hauntings and drowned children bubbling like a fever. Rumor had spread too far. I no longer had control of the narrative. At the ranch, I found another envelope propped against the barn door. This one wasn't printed, wasn't even typed. It was handwritten in shaky block letters. "Stop digging or we'll bury you too." No signature, no logo. Just a threat bare as bone. I scanned it, pinned it to the wall, and felt my resolve harden. If they wanted me buried, it meant I was closer than ever to the truth. That evening, I stood by the fence, staring at the clubhouse lights. From the culvert. The whistle rose again, 3 notes, halting. Mournful. But this time it didn't stop. A second voice joined, higher, almost playful, weaving into the tune like an echo from another child. I gripped the post, skin crawling. Kai had never whistled with anyone else. When I checked the county portal before bed, the newest case left me frozen. Case CE24-3126, possible unregistered minor on ranch property. Attached was a photo, grainy and dark, but the outline was unmistakable. A child, standing in my paddock, head tilted toward the camera, eyes glinting pale as though reflecting light that wasn't there. And if you were me, and every complaint seemed to drag your lost child further into the open, would you keep chasing the truth or close the file forever before it consumed you too? The HOA hosted a community barbecue the following Saturday, banners strung across the clubhouse lawn, tables stacked with burgers and soda. It was the perfect stage for them to parade stability, to show that the subdivision was safe, cheerful, untouched by the complaints and rumors that clung to my ranch. Lon begged me not to go, but I couldn't stay away. Too much of this fight had been kept in the shadows. If they wanted to pretend everything was normal, I'd be there to watch the cracks spread. Families gathered under white tents. Children chased each other across trimmed grass while a local band played upbeat covers. Deborah held court at the microphone, praising volunteers and reminding residents about standards that protect our property values. Her smile was flawless, but her eyes scanned the crowd like a hawk. I lingered at the edge, arms crossed. A few neighbors nodded stiffly, others looked away. Whispers rippled behind me, the words trespassing, haunted, and the flood drifting like gnats. I kept my gaze fixed on the stage. Halfway through her speech, the microphone screeched with static. Deborah tapped it, annoyed. The crowd chuckled nervously. Then the sound shifted, no longer feedback, but a thin whistle rising from the speakers. 3 notes, halting, unmistakable. The chatter died instantly. Parents pulled children closer. Some looked at me, their faces pale. Deborah froze, lips parted, before gesturing sharply to the AV table. The band stopped playing. The whistle grew louder, weaving into the speakers until words broke through. "Mom, Dad, I'm here." Gasps spread through the lawn. A soda can dropped, fizz spilling across a picnic table. The sound didn't fade. It circled, as though every speaker around the clubhouse carried the same voice. My son's voice. Deborah grabbed the microphone, shouting over the noise. Technical issue. Everyone remained calm. Her voice cracked for the first time since I'd known her. The AV tech yanked cables, but the whistle kept flowing. Parents shielded their children's ears. Neighbors turned in confusion and fear. Then, as suddenly as it began, silence. I stood rooted, my heart pounding. This time I wasn't the only one who heard it. Half the subdivision had listened to my son speak from the speakers of their own event. Deborah recovered quickly, forcing a smile. "Apologies for the interruption," she said tightly. "We'll resume shortly." But the damage was done. Whispers swelled again, not just about me, but about the board itself. Some residents stared at her as if she'd lost control of her perfect empire. I slipped away before the event ended. Back at the ranch, I opened my email. A new county case had been filed during the barbecue case. CE24-3127. Public disturbance traced to adjacent ranch. Attached was a photo of me standing at the edge of the crowd, arms crossed, as though I had orchestrated the chaos. The HOA wasn't just burying me in paperwork, they were trying to rewrite what everyone had witnessed with their own eyes. But I knew what I heard. And this time, so did my neighbors. If you were there, standing in the grass with your children clinging to your side, hearing a dead boy's voice echo across every speaker, would you still believe it was only a technical glitch by Monday morning? The subdivision was fractured. At the diner, I overheard two men arguing. One swore the barbecue audio was a ghost. The other insisted it was sabotage. In the grocery store, a woman stopped me in the aisle, clutching her basket like a shield. "I heard it," she whispered. "Your son's voice. I know what I heard." Then, just as quickly, she hurried away before anyone could see her speaking to me. The board tried damage control. Deborah sent an email blast calling the incident a technical malfunction exploited by outside interference. She promised residents the system would be secured. The words reeked of spin. That evening, a group of neighbors showed up at my fence, some angry, some scared. A man in a golf shirt pointed a finger at me. "Whatever you're doing with those recordings, stop it. You're spooking our kids." I shook my head. "I didn't plant anything. I don't control your speakers. You expect us to believe that another snapped. Every time something happens, you're right there." Lan stood beside me, her hand tight around mine. "He lost his child," she said firmly. "Maybe you should stop blaming the father and start asking what your board is hiding," the group muttered, split among themselves. Some turned back toward the clubhouse. Others lingered with uncertain eyes. Factions were forming, just like I'd feared. 2 nights later, the board convened an emergency meeting in the clubhouse. I attended, sitting in the back as residents crowded folding chairs. Deborah stood at the podium, voice steady but strained. "We are investigating malicious interference with our sound system," she announced. "It was not supernatural, and it was not a ghost. Please don't let rumors damage our community." Murmurs filled the room. A woman raised her hand. "Then how do you explain the child's voice?" Deborah's jaw tightened. It was manipulated audio, nothing more. Before she could continue, a man near the front slumped forward, his chair screeching against the floor. Gasps erupted. His wife cried out as neighbors rushed to lift him. He was pale, eyes rolled back, lips murmuring something no one could quite hear. I stepped closer. His mouth formed 3 broken words, sealed in pipe. The room erupted into chaos. Some called 911, others cried. Deborah banged the podium for order, but no one listened. Paramedics arrived within minutes, wheeling the man out. His wife clung to his hand, sobbing. I caught the eyes of several neighbors as they whispered, horror etched on their faces. Some looked at me not with blame, but with recognition. They'd heard the same words I had, words too specific to be coincidence. Back at the ranch, I checked the county portal. Another complaint had landed, filed at the exact time the man collapsed. Case CE 24-3128, unsafe gatherings observed at ranch property. Attached wasn't a photo, but an audio file, the faint echo of the man's voice muttering the same words sealed in pipe. I closed the laptop, pulse hammering. Now it wasn't just my family hearing it. The subdivision itself had been dragged into the haunting. And if you had been in that chair, listening to your neighbor collapse while repeating the same words you'd feared for years, would you still tell yourself it was all just coincidence? The days after the collapse felt like walking through a split neighborhood. Some residents avoided eye contact, crossing the street rather than face me. Others lingered at my fence line with nervous questions they were too afraid to ask out loud. The HOA tried to paper it over with cheery newsletters and flyers about upcoming fall festivals. But everyone had heard the man's words, sealed in pipe. It clung to the air like mildew. One evening, I was repairing a fence post when headlights swept the paddock. A small group of residents approached, flashlights bobbing. At first I thought they'd come to threaten me again. But instead, one woman pressed a folded sheet into my hand. "It was in my mailbox," she whispered. "No return address." I unfolded it under the beam of my headlamp. The paper was lined, the handwriting uneven, as if copied by someone unused to writing. The message read, "Don't let them silence me again." At the bottom was a crude sketch of the culvert, the grate sealed shut. I looked up, heart pounding. "Who gave you this?" She shook her head quickly. "It just appeared. Maybe kids. Maybe not. I don't want trouble." She turned and hurried back toward the subdivision before I could ask more. That night, I scanned the note, added it to my wall of evidence. Threads stretched between documents, photos, complaints, all converging on the drain. Lon stood behind me, arms folded, fear etched on her face. "You're scaring people," she said softly. "I'm not the one planting notes in their mailboxes. But you're the one they'll blame." She was right, even as more neighbors whispered that something was wrong. Deborah's grip on the board hadn't slipped. If anything, she doubled down. Another email blast arrived, warning residents to avoid fear-mongering by outside parties and reminding them of fines for unlawful gatherings. She was tightening her net while the subdivision cracked beneath her. The following weekend, I returned to the clubhouse, not sneaking this time, but standing openly at the edge of the lawn. People stared but didn't chase me off. Some even looked relieved I was there, as though I carried answers they didn't want to admit they needed. Halfway through the board's announcements, the overhead lights flickered. A hush swept the crowd. The microphone picked up static, then a low, rushing sound like water surging through a pipe. The hum built until a child's cough broke through the speakers, wet and ragged. Several children in the audience began to cry. Panic rippled across the lawn. Parents dragged their families away. Others froze, staring at the clubhouse walls as if expecting them to crack open. Deborah's face drained of color. She slammed the microphone off, barking at the AV team, but the cough still echoed once more before fading into silence. I left before the meeting dissolved completely. Back at the ranch, the county portal was already updated. Case CE 243129, disturbance incited by ranch owner. Disruptive presence. Attached was a photo of me standing alone at the back of the crowd. My face circled in red. They were trying to make me the villain of their haunting, but the fear on those parents' faces told a different story. And if you had heard a child's cough rumble through the speakers of your own community gathering, would you still believe the board's claim of a technical malfunction by the time fall crept in? My wall of evidence was impossible to ignore. Photos, complaints, contracts, and scraps of anonymous warnings stretched across the office like a spider's web. Lan begged me to take it down, to stop before it swallowed us whole. But I couldn't. Every thread pulled tighter toward the truth, and I was ready to drag it into the light. The next HOA board meeting was packed. Residents who once avoided me now showed up out of curiosity, nerves, or outright fear. I carried a binder under my arm, the stormwater contract on top. The room buzzed with tension. Deborah sat at the head table, her smile brittle, her husband behind her like a shadow. When the floor opened, I stood. My voice shook at first, but anger steadied it. "This is the work order your board signed," I said, holding up the contract. "Cole & Sons Maintenance welded shut the grate under your clubhouse. The same year my son vanished in that flood." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Deborah's jaw tightened. "That document is taken out of context," I cut her off. "Out of context or out of conscience." I slapped the next page onto the table, the torn log page given to me by the older neighbor. Original records. Payment from HOA funds. How many of you knew the room fractured instantly? Some residents shouted for explanations. Others turned pale, whispering. A woman in the front row covered her mouth as tears welled. Deborah raised her voice above the din. "This meeting is not a courtroom. You cannot come here with fabricated documents and accuse this board of crimes." I leaned closer, my words sharp. "Then explain this. Why did my cameras capture audio files injected from your treasurer's account? Why did your clubhouse speakers carry my son's voice during your own events? The AV technician in the corner froze, eyes darting down. A murmur swept the crowd. Before Deborah could respond, the lights flickered. The microphone hissed. A low whistle filled the room. 3 broken notes that silenced everyone. Then words crackled through, louder than any voice in the hall. Dad, I'm not gone. Chaos erupted. Some residents fled, others clutched their children. Deborah pounded the podium, screaming at the techs, but her control had finally cracked. The very walls of her empire betrayed her. I stood frozen, my throat tight. The voice hadn't been faint, distorted, or buried in static. It was clear, strong, alive. My son's voice, not from memory or file, but as if he were in the room with us. When the sound died, silence crashed down. Residents stared at me, at Deborah, at the ceiling. No one knew where to point their fear anymore. I gathered my binder, heart hammering. Tonight hadn't been just about documents or accusations. Tonight. Kai himself had spoken, and the community had heard him, walking out into the cold night air. I knew one thing: the HOA could bury me in complaints, could twist every witness, but they could no longer contain what was breaking loose. And if you had stood in that room, listening as a dead child's voice cut through the lies of your leaders, would you still trust the board's story or your own ears the morning after the meeting? The subdivision boiled with fury. Half the residents demanded answers from the board. The other half whispered that I had orchestrated the entire spectacle. Deborah released a statement within hours, calling the voice digitally manipulated audio designed to destabilize the community. But her words rang hollow. She'd lost her composure in front of them, and everyone had seen it. By noon, an envelope appeared in my mailbox. This one wasn't a notice or a fine. It was a letter from the HOA's attorney, threatening defamation charges if I continued spreading falsehoods. Lan read it with trembling hands. "They're trying to bury you legally now," she whispered. I nodded grimly. "Which means they're scared." That night, I sorted through my files, piecing together the puzzle. The work order, the contractor log, the torn page from the neighbor, the anonymous sketch of the culvert. Every shred pointed back to the welded grate. And then there was the audio, injected into both my cameras and their own systems, carrying Kai's whistle like a signature no one else could forge. As if on cue, my laptop pinged. Another file had been uploaded into my system log without my command. This one was different, cleaner. I pressed play. The screen lit with shaky video. A boy's face filled the frame, older now, scarred across the jawline, but unmistakably his Kai. His eyes stared straight into mine through the camera, wet with fear, but alive. "Dad," he whispered. "They kept me. They made me someone else. Don't stop." Then the feed cut to black. I reeled back, breath torn from my lungs. Lan came running. When she saw the frozen frame, she covered her mouth, tears spilling. "It's him," she choked. "Mark, it's really him." I saved the file 3 times, backed it up on 2 drives. Proof beyond paper, beyond rumor, proof that my son wasn't just a memory. The next HOA meeting was called in haste. This time, I didn't sit quietly. I stood before the residents with my laptop open. The video paused at Kai's scarred face. "You want to call me delusional?" I said, voice shaking but strong. "Then explain this." Gasps rolled through the hall as I played the clip. Mothers clutched their children. Fathers swore under their breath. Even Deborah faltered, her lips parting as the boy's voice filled the room. "That's fabricated," she shouted. "Deepfake nonsense. Deepfake doesn't leave scars." I shot back. Deepfake doesn't know the tune only my son whistled since he was 4. The crowd erupted, neighbors shouting over one another. Some demanded investigations, others accused Deborah of a cover-up. The fragile unity of the subdivision shattered before my eyes. And then, as the voices rose, the speakers overhead crackled again. Not static this time, not distortion, but the same boy's voice, calm and steady. "Dad, I'm coming home." Every head turned upward. Silence fell like a weight. Deborah slammed the gavel on the podium, but the sound of her authority was lost. For the first time, I wasn't the one on trial. The board was, walking out into the night. The words echoed in my ears. Kai wasn't gone. He was reaching back, step by step, and the board could no longer keep him sealed away. The days that followed tore Silver Creek apart. Some residents demanded Deborah resign immediately. Others rallied behind her, clinging to the idea that everything, the voices, the video, the collapsing neighbor, was a hoax designed to smear their community. The HOA board split into factions, tempers boiling in plain sight, but no amount of denial could erase what they had all seen. The boy's face on my laptop, scarred but alive, was burned into memory. The sound of his voice carried more weight than any notice or complaint, and now whispers of lawsuits circled not around me but around the board. One evening, I caught sight of Deborah's husband leaving the clubhouse with 2 contractors in tow. They carried toolboxes toward the culvert, flashlights bobbing. I followed at a distance, camera in hand. They crouched at the welded grate, muttering. One man tapped at the steel with a mallet. Sparks flashed as if they were preparing to cut or reinforce it. I snapped photos, heart hammering. They weren't trying to deny the weld, they were trying to hide it deeper. The next morning, I brought the photos to a group of residents who had started gathering outside the clubhouse steps. "They're covering their tracks," I told them. "If we don't act now, the proof will vanish." The group buzzed with anger. One man shouted that he'd seen too much already, that his kid still woke screaming from the sound at the barbecue. Another woman said she wanted to sue the board for emotional distress. The HOA's iron control was slipping with every word. That night, another video appeared in my system log. This one sharper, longer. Kai again, standing in a dim room with concrete walls. He looked older still, his face gaunt, but his eyes alive. "They kept me here," he whispered. "They said no one would believe, but I remember. I remember the water and the dark. Dad, I'm almost home." Lon broke into sobs when she heard it. For the first time, she stopped telling me to quit. She touched the screen like she could reach through it. "Bring him back," she whispered. At the following meeting, I didn't wait to be recognized. I stormed to the front, dropped the photos of Deborah's husband at the culvert onto the podium, and connected my laptop to the projector. Kai's newest video filled the wall. The room was silent. Not even Deborah spoke this time. The residents stared at the boy's scarred face as his words echoed through the hall. When the video ended, murmurs rose, questions, demands, accusations. A man shouted that he wanted the board investigated for child endangerment. Another demanded the county reopen old cases. Deborah tried to regain control, slamming the gavel. "This is manipulation," she screamed. "We will not be blackmailed by lies," but her voice cracked under the weight of the crowd. Then the speakers hummed. Everyone froze. Kai's voice filled the hall once more, steady and calm. "You can't bury me again." The crowd erupted. Some cried, some fled, some shouted at the board. Deborah's gavel pounded uselessly against the podium. The illusion of her authority shattered like glass. I walked out into the night, the voices of neighbors still ringing behind me. My binder was heavy under my arm, But my heart was heavier with the truth Kai was not just a memory. He was coming back. And nothing the HOA did could silence him any longer. By October, the subdivision no longer pretended to be calm. Yellow leaves drifted across sidewalks while arguments crackled on every corner. Some demanded the board step down. Others clung to Deborah's version of sabotage. But one fact could no longer be buried: the welded grate existed, and her husband's company had sealed it. I delivered everything to the county investigator: contracts, photographs, videos, even the anonymous notes. For once, the official's eyes didn't glaze over. He leaned forward as I played Kai's last recording, his scarred face filling the screen. The man scribbled notes, jaw tight. "This isn't just a nuisance complaint anymore," he said. "This is obstruction. This is liability." The very next day, county trucks rolled into Silver Creek. Residents poured onto lawns as code officers and deputies crossed the clubhouse grounds. Deborah stormed out, shouting about private property, about warrants. The sheriff's deputy held up papers stamped with a judge's signature. "Inspection order," he said flatly. "You'll step aside." I stood at the fence, binder clutched tight, as the crew cut into the welded grate. Sparks flew, the same sharp flash I had seen when Deborah's husband tried to hide it weeks earlier. Residents crowded behind barricades, phones raised, whispering, gasping. For once, I wasn't the one accused, I was the one watching justice slice open steel. When the final weld broke, a gush of stagnant water spilled out, thick with mud and leaves. The smell was suffocating. Workers coughed, pulling back, but kept going. They hauled out rusted debris, broken toys, a bent bicycle rim, scraps of clothing rotted from years underground. One worker lifted a shoe from the muck, small, mud-stained, its laces knotted. My knees gave out. Lon caught me before I fell. It was Kai's. I knew it even through the filth. The crowd hushed. Deborah's face drained of color, her husband backing away as though distance could erase his name on the contract. Neighbors whispered, some crossing themselves, others sobbing quietly. The illusion of HOA authority collapsed in that moment more thoroughly than any lawsuit ever could. The investigators sealed the site, tagging every piece of debris. The grate yawned open now, no longer a secret, and as deputies taped off the area, a single sound drifted from the culvert, soft, halting, the whistle that had haunted me for months, clear enough that others froze, staring into the darkness. A child's whistle, echoing where no child stood. I clutched Lan's hand, unable to breathe. Proof of negligence, proof of cover-up that was enough to bring the board down. But the sound lingering from the pipe reminded everyone that justice on paper could never bury what had been lost. The sheriff turned toward me, his voice steady but respectful. "Mr. Tran, we'll need a full statement. Tonight the county's going to treat this as both a code violation and a potential criminal matter." I nodded, my chest tight, the whistle still ringing in my ears. The drain was open, the secrets pouring out, and the board had no ground left to stand on. And if you had stood at that fence, watching steel split apart to reveal the shoe of a boy you lost years ago, would you feel relief that justice was finally coming, or terror at the sound that proved he had never truly left? The days after the inspection broke the board's hold for good. News trucks parked along the manicured entrance to Silver Creek, cameras rolling as deputies escorted boxes of files out of the clubhouse. Reporters repeated the same words: cover-up, negligence, obstruction. For the first time in years, the weight wasn't pressing down on my ranch. It was pressing down on them. Deborah resigned within 48 hours. Her husband was taken in for questioning, his company's record subpoenaed. The treasurer, the one whose account had injected files into my cameras, refused to speak to the press, face pale behind dark glasses. The community that once prided itself on spotless lawns and spotless reputations had become a crime scene. But victory felt nothing like I imagined, because even with the grate cut open, with evidence piled high and justice grinding forward, the whistle didn't stop. At night, as the subdivision tried to sleep through the glare of news vans, I still heard it, 3 notes floating from the culvert, like breath carried on the wind. Then the final file appeared. It dropped into my system without a trace, no origin, no timestamp. A video, sharper than all the others. Kai again, older still, his scars clearer under dim light. He looked into the camera, voice trembling but steady. "Dad," he said, "you fought for me. You found the truth. But I can't come back the way you want. Remember me as I was, not as what they made me." Lon sobbed quietly behind me as I replayed it, each word carving deeper into my chest. Proof of life, proof of loss, tangled into one. The county pressed charges. Residents began filing lawsuits of their own, some for property value, others for emotional distress. Silver Creek fractured beyond repair. Where there had been unity enforced by fines and bylaws, there was only suspicion, bitterness, and grief. We stood by the culvert one evening, just Lan and me. The grate was gone now, cut away, the pipe gaping into darkness. I placed Kai's shoe on the grass above it, a marker of both his absence and his presence. The wind stirred, and the whistle rose again, softer this time, almost gentle, weaving through the reeds before fading into silence. Lan squeezed my hand. Maybe that's all he wanted. She whispered. To be heard, to not be sealed away anymore. The sheriff told me justice would come, charges, trials, financial ruin for the board that once ruled like tyrants. But standing there in the twilight, I realized justice was only part of what we needed. The rest was something no courtroom could provide. The ranch is still here. Inspector stopped coming. The county closed every case against me. But when I walk the fence at night, the air carries a tune I can't unhear. So I'll ask you if you uncovered the truth, exposed the guilty, and freed your family from the weight of lies, but the voice of your lost child still echoed in the dark. Would you feel peace knowing justice was done? Or would you lie awake, listening, wondering if he was still calling out for you? The subdivision looked hollow once the board was gone. The clubhouse stood shuttered, its windows dark, the manicured lawns left untrimmed. The sign at the gate Silver Creek Estates Homeowners Association was stripped of its lettering, leaving only the shadow of words against faded metal. For the first time in decades, there was no board, no rules, no fines, just neighbors who no longer trusted one another. I walked the perimeter of my ranch with Lon at my side. The fence had been repaired, the barn door patched, the nail hole finally filled. Inspectors no longer came. No new complaints appeared on the county portal. Yet peace still eluded me. Each night the whistle carried through the culvert, 3 halting notes threading the dark. One evening, as twilight bled across the fields, I saw a figure at the far end of the paddock. Small, shoulders narrow, head tilted. My heart seized. I stepped closer, calling softly, "Kai." The figure didn't answer. It only raised one arm, pointing toward the clubhouse ruins. By the time I reached the fence line, the shape dissolved into shadow, leaving nothing but the rustle of leaves. Neighbors whispered about seeing the same figure near the culvert, a child darting between streetlights, always vanishing before anyone could approach. Some swore it was my boy returned. Others muttered it was the ghost of every secret the board had tried to bury. Either way, no one stayed long by the clubhouse after sunset. I tried to convince myself it was imagination, the echo of grief stitched into the land. But then another file appeared in my system log, unmarked, untimed. I pressed play. The screen showed the culvert mouth, camera shaking as though held by unsteady hands. A boy's voice whispered, "Dad, I'm free now, but I can't stay." The feed ended with the same whistle, drawn out, fading like breath into silence. Lon wept when I told her. She placed Kai's shoe on the mantel, lit a candle beside it, and said nothing more. The county would move on. Lawsuits would drag for years. Deborah and her husband would face trial, their empire of fines turned into evidence against them. But none of that changed the emptiness in the field at night, or the way the air still carried his tune. I sometimes wonder if Kai survived in some form the board never meant me to discover, or if the videos and files were only fragments of something between memory and haunting. Maybe the truth was both. Maybe the boy who called me Dad could never come home the way I hoped. But he could never be erased either. Now. When the wind shifts and the culvert sighs, I stop what I'm doing and listen. The notes are always the same, faltering yet steady, as if reminding me that justice on paper is only half the story. The other half lingers in the dark, waiting. And I ask you if your child's voice called out from beyond steel and silence. Not once, but again and again. Would you believe it was closure? Or would you keep listening, hoping one day they'd walk back through your door,